And so we are kind of, to be honest, we're kind of the groundwork, what tools you can use and where to go. So that's where we're at right now. But we wanted to start out with a little poll question. So everyone take out your cell phones. If you don't have a cell phone, it's okay.
I have a cell phone. We don't bring it.
We'll just kind of do a what we want to do is we want to identify what relationship you have with analyzing student work. So, we all think of these teen loves going on. We have some people that, they just haven't met yet. And by the way you do this is you're going to text. This is the phone number you're texting it to, so you're texting the code to. And then this would be in the subject is the number that you choose or the area that you choose. So we're identifying the relationship, so you haven't met yet, or maybe you're starting to see one another, okay? Maybe you made it through a few first dates and it's going well, so you got analyzing student work's kind of happening. You've been in the relationship a little bit, so it's kind of on the rocks, and maybe you've been with analyzing student work and it's just not going well, you just don't like it. So identify yourself in one of those areas, please. If we kind of get a poll of where we're at in the room in regards to our relationship to analyzing student work. Hey, we got one. Okay. So from our last class, and it looks like this one for the ones that had participated, we had everybody kind of they've been exposed to it, maybe they've done it a few times, or they've done it a few times and they're tired of doing it. So this class seems to be, maybe we have a lot of people that have been exposed to it, and maybe we're looking for some more. So that'll kind of help us along the way here, Jack. All right, our essential questions and understandings.
And, some of these are kind of a derivative of a little bit of the questions we think about, the paradigms we think about in our PLCs. So we kind of have that same thinking today. How will we know students are learning? What will we do to help students grow? And what are effective differentiation strategies to use in the classroom, both for those below and exceeding is the trick. And then the big understanding is really the emphasis on collaboratively analyzing student work, kind of discussing those relationships of the work, and being able to improve work samples through that assessment and conversation.
Okay. And kind of our learning targets or outcomes today. We want to identify the key elements in analyzing student work. And anytime you see ASW, that's also known as analyzing student work. So what's the relationship between analyzing student work and the continuous improvement cycle? And then just becoming familiar with some of the tools that you could use to analyze student work, but also maybe a toolbox of strategies, which I apologize, we're going to give you a toolbox of strategies and it does have typos on it. I apologize now, just letting you know. I see a lot of English teachers in the room and it's making me feel a little nervous about it. All right, we are going to start out, we're going to try to model, obviously, good teaching while we're presenting right now. And so we are going to do a little pre-assessment. And we would like you to complete the pre-assessment, 3 questions. After you're done 3 questions, you don't need to put your name on it.
Just
but
a few
please
quick bullets.
Bring them to the front of the room. You can put them face down on this table. We're going to collect them and analyze that work here while we are going through the session. Perhaps we will change the way we're teaching based on the information we've. All right, real quick, we're going to connect the learning. And why we do analyze student work, and then how it fits into the whole big picture. And so if we look into the 4 critical questions of a PLC, you look at that, what do we want our students to learn? And in that rainbow continuum, that's kind of that red and orange that Noreen was talking about. And then the next 3 really dive into how the ASW process fits in with that. So how will we know what they were learning? We need to be able to look at the students' work to respond to it. And then when we respond, we need to do it in a timely manner, both for the ones that got it and the ones that didn't get it. So what are we going to do to respond? And then if we look at that continuous improvement cycle, this just connected to Our PLC process, the continuous improvement cycle, is directly related to our PLC process, and then to our RTI or to our MTSS. And to get through a full cycle, you need to be able to analyze that student work and then develop and implement strategies to improve the student results, which that jumps you over into your remediation cycle or your extension cycle, and how you're going to work with students and plan that. Everybody's seen that before, right? On the same page? All right. Okay. Jeff.
All right, we're going to just have you kind of hook up and read two short passages. Both of these are from Mike Mattos's book on RTI, Simplifying RTI. So it's all about collaboration and the PLC process and how that's so important and crucial if we're going to actually be doing the analyzing student work at a high level. So you need those structures in place. So I'm going to give maybe a group of people a separate article. There's two articles. And at your group, you can divide up sections and just think about what's the key ideas in those sections and be able to share out some of those. So one group is going to get about collaborative teacher teams. And I'll give you guys collaborative teacher teams as well. Is that enough? And the other half will be doing just determining student needs. So again, kind of with the determining student needs section, look at maybe dividing up half of the article amongst each other.
Can we mark on these there?
You may mark on these. This is not all new stuff to everybody, but it just kind of puts it in a framework for us to all be on a common page. Any questions? We'll just take a few minutes to read your section. We'll have a little discussion time at your table, and then we'll share out. What we'll do is first have the two groups that read the first article or section, which was more about the collaboration. And again, I want to reemphasize that as a district, we've been doing a lot of the stuff in the blue zone with analyzing student work for quite a while now. But it's in that whole spirit of moving to the next level, more collaborative, and more routine and more efficiency, which we can always improve on. So, given some of the information in this first section, can someone please summarize maybe an important point or two about collaborative teacher teams for the group that didn't get a chance to read it?
Well, bullet points for the first section is talking about that you've got a group that are course alike, they're highly trained, they have the credentials within the subject area, they know the content best, and have the data to work with as well as talking about their students. And then the second part of that first page is it poses the question, should we expect history teachers to be able to teach, effectively? Yeah, that's what we're hired for. So, the expectation needs to fall on us. That shouldn't be an unrealistic expectation. We need to figure out how to do it.
Right. So like Noreen said, the power, the answer, the power is in the room that's having the discussion. Second section on that first article talked about teacher team structures. And any comments about how college is moving along in this area? Any implications that any of the teams want to share, maybe that group?
Yeah, I could share. There are different team structures, so more at the elementary level you have grade level teams, and then more high school you have content or subject specific teams. You also have vertical teams, like today would be a great example of that, where you have 7-12, and then interdisciplinary teams, which I don't know if schools do. At point when I subbed years and years ago, they had teams set up like that, where it was like the Hawk team, and then they would meet.
Right.
So I don't know if they still do that, but. And then they gave some options and some suggestions some schools that were successful had 2 sets, so they met as a content team and then interdisciplinary team, but then that was a lot. That's a lot of meeting, a lot of collaboration
Right.
too.
Right, and some of our special education teachers run into that boat. I'm sure you do
Yeah.
as well. A lot of teams. And then there was a third section that dealt more with school leadership teams. Any important information from that to share? That one really kind of alludes to the fact what Noreen talked about this morning, that there's analyzing student work on the micro level with, formative assessments and summative assessments in the classroom. But there's also a need to do macro level, the large analysis of student work for the district. How are we progressing as a district? So that's kind of what is also indicating is a need in analyzing student work. So thank you for reading those little passages from Mike Matos. So how about the determining student needs? And there really was one section, but maybe can we get a couple comments that are relevant to the group that didn't get to read it?
What I thought was interesting about, they talk about universal screening tools.
Right.
And the difference between brief and detailed and the sort of data that you mine from that. And that the results from those universal screening tools can then be used to help teachers sort of get a knowledge of their students, where they're at, and then to be able to help take them to that next level. So, which I thought was an interesting idea for the district.
Yes.
And is that being done? I'm sure there are some in our
I think-
district.
I don't-
mean, I-
So like screening tools, so it's very common at the elementary level that if you've ever heard of like Dibbles or Days Bros or, Kicking the Floor.
Or
So
even
you're
map.
looking, and then a map could be used as a screener, but then you're looking at more like a Jamestown probe or words per minute fluency probe. And so when you want to look more specific, so like math, social studies, what could be a screener at the high school level? And I don't know if there's Skills Iowa. So some districts, you're required to do 2 AYP assessments. Some do Skills Iowa instead of a map test. And in Skills Iowa, there's different pieces that actually break down into kind of a screener level. And so there's different tools that are available and out there. But yeah, it's as you get up the ladder, it becomes more departmentalized, and so the screeners look a little different.
And then there's a nice, interesting graphic on the second page that maybe it'd be good to summarize for the group that didn't read it. I mean, basically, it's kind of saying that if in determining needs for our students, we really want to be proactive and be thinking ahead of the ball as far as what's our plan for remediation when we do identify kids that need that basic skill remediation. What's our plan after initial instruction if they just need a minor intervention? And what's the plan for those that are exceeding so that we're not always, reacting, we're being more proactive. So, anyways,
I
yeah.
thought the one section, it talked about what structures or schedules currently exist, that
Sure.
for remediation and intervention and extension, what resources exist, and then, I guess those are the 2 main ones, because, does our schedule, we now, at the high school level, we now have the RTI, we have the enrichment on Thursdays, but that's a half hour. I mean, that's a schedule, but is that enough? I mean, is that?
And what takes
And
place
is
in
it
your
right?
class period, and,
Right.
and what's the structure of your room look like, and those are the questions on how to make it. And you look at a big system or a big school like the high school or Victoria Point, it's like, okay, managing those pieces can be difficult.
All right, thank you.
So, Jack,
Yes.
I don't know about you, but I think maybe it's a good time that we just kind of stop where we're at in this presentation. We've been going along a little bit. We've gotten some formative feedback from the group. We did the quick relationship poll. And then we actually, while you guys were reading your article, we had an opportunity to analyze the pre-assessment that happened. And as we went through, by the way, we're kind of making up numbers and making this up. So, as we went through, we pulled up our Analyzing Student Work form. And again, this is the one that's kind of from that new Teacher Center. We have our 4 critical questions of PLC there. So what did we want the students to learn? So we already outlined our learning targets. We talked about those at the beginning of the presentation and what our outcomes wanted to be. Expectations of student work. So what will a proficient student be able to be? Maybe we didn't outline that as well, but again, this was a pre-assessment, and so maybe we could go back, and that's one of the things we could do is really outline what we want them to do. But as we looked at that student work, we had some students that fell below standard. We had some students that were proficient. We had some students that really went above and beyond, and they were actually able to pull out many different examples and how they use them on that quick slip. And so, what did you notice about the students that maybe fell below and didn't do it as well, or some of the teachers that were listening to answers?
Yeah, I suppose that it was nobody in this group. It was the previous group. But just less depth and not as many examples were
Okay,
given.
yeah, and I think the proficient ones, they listed maybe ways that they check for understanding, and then they also listed ways that they differentiate. And I saw some of the exceeding ones. They did a really good job of writing how they differentiate and like what setting it's in and how many times they do it. Yeah. And so I think at this point in our presentation, Jack, we need to talk about how we should differentiate for this group of teachers and how we should move forward with the rest of the session. So we kind of identified, some did a really good job and were able to identify many standards or many checks for understanding and ways to differentiate. Some maybe said, oh, maybe I just reteach, but maybe didn't have some tools in the toolbox. So how do you think we should move forward with this?
It'd be nice to divide into nice 3 groups, but, based on...
Yeah, we kind of have a small group here, so maybe if we go 2 groups.
Yeah.
So we should probably maybe go 2 groups. And I'll take one of the groups. We could flex groups, even though these is in our class. We could flex group. You take some of my kids.
Sure.
I'll take some of your kids based on the need. And not kids, but teachers. And we can each kind of do an individual lesson on that. And so why don't you take one group and you'll work on maybe some vignettes and how you could apply it. Yep. And I'll take a group and we can work on maybe some practical application and maybe work with the tools a little bit. So does that sound like a good way to proceed with the session?
Yep.
Okay, so I think we used your pre-assessment, we analyzed it, and now I think we've came up with a good strategy or how to intervene with the rest of the session. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go back to the session after we took that little break to analyze how we're doing. So what we did, we tried to model real quickly how we would analyze our protocol, and so how we would go about, holy cow, went way ahead, how we would divide up. And what we did, actually, we did a quick sort. So we took it, we went 3 piles, and if you were doing this with your teacher team, you could do a sampling, maybe a 15% sampling, and you can identify how students are doing and what they need, and then be able to talk about what went well, what were their struggles, and then how are you going to intervene on that. And so what we are actually going to do is we're going to just take half the room. So let's have maybe if you would like to go over here, and then you 3 kind of hop over here, and I'll go with this group first, Jack, and you go with this first group. Right. And we're going to dive deeper a little bit into the finite examples here.
I'm wearing the special badge that
Yeah, if we can gather around these 2 tables, perfect.
All right, friends. How are we doing?
All right.
Okay, so what I'd like everyone to do,
Sit down.
I didn't copy this very well, but we are. Well,
All right.
you get a front and there. It's a front and
We're
back. So you
basically
need
just going to do some simple practice.
You
of
keep
some
those.
Real data from real classrooms. And again, when you do vignettes, you never
And
get
for some
the
reason I'm
depth
one short.
of
Yeah, it'll be
the
okay.
situation.
All right,
The
so
art of
what I've given
teaching
you
has
is
gone
maybe
like
some
the vignette.
indicators in effective
But
PLC.
just
So what does it look
The
like? What does it
conversation
feel like
about
when you're
where
working in a
students are,
PLC?
what their needs are,
And then
and how
also,
we're
what I want you to
differentiate what we're
take
after.
is,
So,
take one of the analyzing student.
if you want to
sheets,
work,
and
there's
we're just
two
gonna quickly
vignettes,
talk
one's
about-
kind of an algebra one
Some are blue, some are white.
problem,
Ran
and the
out.
other one's
was
kind of
gonna
a
say,
more
does
of
it-
an English history kind of vignette. So
We had a
I'll
line
pass
for-
these
for-
out. And if you want to work in groups of 2 or 3,
Okay. So how many of
I'm going
you
to also pass
have-
out
This is straight
this
from the New
little
Teacher Center. And adapted by
analyzing
teams
student work
and, you know,
structure.
9 years ago when I was doing this in Spring, July.
as a guide. You can write on it.
How many of you have worked through this analyzing
Pass
student
those
work before?
down. Right.
So basically, and this is like what Jack and I just quickly modeled, but what you need to do is you need to be able to identify your standards and learning target. You need to be
So
able to
probably think
talk
about
about what is proficiency,
having a
so
little,
what are the students
analyzing
supposed to be
student
doing and what are the
meeting,
outcomes? So I can look at
figuring out
look at
the
the performance scale,
differentiation you're going to do
proficiency scale.
for 5
And then you're just gonna
minutes,
take that sampling
we'll maybe
and you're gonna
figure
either
out-
list students' names quickly, or you can
Is
just
someone
list the
gonna take the
percentage of
math?
students, and then you're gonna talk about their performance. Okay, so what are some of the things that they were doing under each of the levels? That's how you can identify. Then
And
ways
here are
to
also some time tested
differentiate
tools, although
So
I'm
what does the low group need to
have
be
plenty of
proficient? What does
tools in
the
their
proficient
bag.
group need to move forward? What are we gonna do with the kids that knew it and exceeded? So
Recognize
just
too,
basically, teachers, this is a natural
obviously,
process for teachers.
There's different
And
levels
everybody
of
kind of does it in their
analyzing
head,
student
and this just goes through your plan.
limitations and basics.
This just takes it and puts it on
foundational skills all the
paper,
way
so
to
you can
higher
physically
order
see.
synthesis
And
skills.
it's also nice
You
to
see
use
that every
as a
day.
group,
You work with that
because
every
you can
day. How do you
put multiple
differentiate
teachers
that?
along the side. You can compare, contrast strategies on how you taught the lesson, because we all know we are all starting at a starting point in our little journey along the roads, and so we have a specific standard or a unit we're teaching. Now, then that art of teaching takes place where you're gonna maybe teach a content, but you might take a little different path and use different strategies, but you're all doing a common assessment at the end. And so which strategies work best and what can we do to get there? So it's just that idea of what's gonna be best in analyzing it. What I'd like to share with you now is the idea of this same framework.
Sure.
And using the idea that we need to identify specific skills and standards that kids are proficient on, but then applying it to kind of that macro look.
There's kids that are
Right
in
now,
multiple
our
groups.
literacy and our math departments have a requirement of
No.
turning in by student by
Those are
standard.
different.
So are kids proficient?
But there's
on
all
each
sorts of
standard
these
or learning
kids, could be
target.
other
And so what
places,
that
could
could
be
look
in
like
both. There's,
Assuming this is part of
is
They
a form
could
like
do
this.
this.
And so basically we took the same idea
No,
that is on this analyzing student form.
of those 8,
Okay.
there
And
were
we put it
kids that
here.
had multiple
And
issues.
so what you
and
would
some
do
that
as a
they don't
teacher,
have. Some only
Okay.
had one
Um,
issue.
And I'm gonna use Chuck, Chuck, you wanna use this? Okay. So, Chuck,
3 are exceeding and 15.
so
and then
Chuck works with a team of 3
Those 15 are
7th grade science teachers. And each science teacher,
Right.
you can plug in your names, you could just do teacher A, B, and C. But you would plug in either your standards or your learning targets, and you would just say, how many students do you have overall? How many scored at the proficient level?
This
So
is just
you could say if it's 80% or 85%,
This
soon the
is
district's gonna
framework to
say
help you with
what that's gonna be. But right now, we let the PLCs define that. But
Use
then
it
you
as
can
a-
quickly see
just as a
how many students are
thinking
proficient
tool,
on
you
particular
may
standard or not. And then what you would do, and then you can just see as a team, as a grade level team, where did that fall? But then you would go over and list the students that were not proficient on that score. Then all of a sudden, you have a list of kids.
Yeah.
So how does that change? So they need to be retaught, they need
Yes.
to have an
Some of those
opportunity
kids
to
have only
relearn that
one
standard.
problem.
You have a list for your MCSS, your RTI site right away. Okay, and we'll also have that macro view of how many kids really know
Probably
or
is.
seems proficient on a standard. And then it has the same piece down below. So what is the common misconceptions, or what did they do well, or what did they not do well at in each area? And so you're not going necessarily by student line, or you're going to do it, you're going to paint a broad picture.
Well,
So for the group of kids that you sorted out into.
Don't worry about their numbers.
What are some of the common
Well,
things
sometimes
that
what
they
we get
did
to
not
with
do
the
well?
numbers is, if I
Okay, and then you would go down,
have
what do we need to do to
more year than
differentiate?
year, that's
What are some of the
my-
strategies that we're going to use in the classroom?
There's a lot of.
We have a,
there's
there's a
lot of
handout that we'll use for some of those strategies that you could use in the classroom.
I
And it
know,
just gets to the
right.
point that you
Or
get to
they-
like
Like
the
the eight,
term
like the eight
document,
students,
and then you can use this one year to year
They
to
missed
see
just one little
how they're
Yeah.
thing.
comparing,
And then to me,
so
it's
they're
like,
comparing
that
the
was
class to
like
class, and then also what are some of the
Yeah.
strategies that
Or
you
is
use
that they have
in the
no
past
documentation.
to help these students along the way.
See, of those
Chuck,
five.
you've used this before. Do you want to kind of just
We're all
talk through your
we're working
feeling,
towards
how's
the
it,
actual.
you know, what do you like to use
Kids.
the document, or?
This five, if you go to the curriculum formula, the five do this.
That they can't take a
You just-
racial group or.
And it's also two different sensory content too. So you've got kind of kids in different
Well, you've
areas.
got problems with, you've got problems with X and Y values and slope.
Right.
And you've got your just numerical problems and positive and negative values.
Right.
So it's like, is it a concept of the graph, or is it a
But
basic
you're right.
numerical, just from positive?
You could go like 3 here and 5 here.
But
Yeah.
it is, you can't put together.
The other thing is too, what happens is.
It's still, every year, it's
I did another.
Again, there were kids that had one issue, there were kids that had 2 issues.
It's hard to use that data at times.
I was gonna
Yeah,
say-
you have to follow through, yeah, regardless of what I know.
Right. Sure,
Right.
sure. If it were one or two.
I'm inferring.
It's really
That's another,
the
that is a good point though, look at the
thing to be
numbers.
focusing on is what, for any subgroup, what is the thing that needs to be focused in instruction, what kind of instruction would be looking at, what kind of differentiation.
I guess,
And then
in my mind, when I was hearing about it, I go
then you
backwards,
ask them,
and I think about when I'm planning my lessons,
logistically,
Yeah,
where they know it.
Right.
So you have your knowledge, and you have a
So it's like
baseline
we
of
were,
my
they're
kiddos,
doing this stuff.
and where they're at.
It's nice.
And
But
so, like, I just need to throw my level, my first period out, I do more
So
scaffolding
that,
for them
that
because I've got
presume,
5
like,
IEP
so
kids.
for us, that would presume that everybody number one has the assessment
And so.
evaluated by the same
Well,
point.
for them,
Number two, that what time you have given to us for our course
why,
pack or
was it
whatever,
attendance issue?
we actually can devote to that.
Well, I don't know what I
So
would
it's
say.
why it's failure.
Again, yeah, so
And
you
then,
cannot
once again,
treat
that
all
whole
the
international piece.
depths of this.
But
You guys are getting so much done. I
like
had two
stations like math,
Right.
take B,
Yes.
and move them up in their own station, and you can take, and you've got maybe more explorers, so how to meet it, and then the far below, you can control, I can far below, here, I gotta do it here.
Or is there a way you can take some kids in groups?
Was that the same question?
Yeah, where the rubber meets, as always, where the rubber meets the road.
But whatever, done with that unit though, with that.
Practical standard
Or science.
a class like this and have multiple issues for kids where you have some, half the class.
Also,
Almost 2/3 of the class is proficient or exceeding.
we're using,
So how do you have one person,
they have,
you have pressures in high school,
their assessment.
how do you,
So it was already set up.
Yeah,
when
it's
is that
set up.
conversation gonna happen, when it's, okay, you have all this curriculum to go through, but you can slow down. And what do you do with these kids? Can they be, could these kids be, what are they?
When actually.
Well,
Practical statements here.
you, I mean, at the theoretical level, you're having these conversations at your math PLC on Monday, and you decide that one office hours is gonna teach these kids, another office hours is gonna teach
years, flex tuition.
But see, that we've got.
I mean, in theory, we're not there yet.
That's what
And like in our-
say, how long the, I mean, you're
That's
right.
what we're trying to do.
And if I'm working.
So that's where the,
Set like where
the indicators of effective PLC come into play, because when you identify those common assessments, then agree to them and say, all right, everybody's doing this, because we all have that starting point, we have that ending point. Then where we can differ on the path is how we bring in that part of teaching. We have to have the same starting point, we have to have the same ending point, and then we also have to agree, because I work with great closely, and it's tough when we have 130 some papers, and it's like, all right, guys, it's gonna take a while, but we have to agree that by this day, before we can start assessing them.
Where do you sit? You're where you sit.
That's where we're at now. This is where we need to go.
And then it becomes always about it. It's always about it. Because they don't pass the test.
But if, here it is, here's the two standards, and there's probably, yeah, it's question 6, question 7.
That by the time they get to
13
ninth,
questions.
and then it's like based on their grades and their grades, they have not got the skills to.
Do what, say
Why
again?
am I taking 13 questions on the test?
A lower grade. And then they're winding them
Why
back.
am I taking questions?
And to me, the social promotion.
Here's the back page, these two, I pulled that paper off.
His ideas detrimental because
So why am I, yeah,
then they're trying to, at 19,
And
trying
the
to get them
other
up to
thing
speed
is,
so
we
they
make those assessments or common
get their
assessments,
test to graduate.
like, put that running target on the assessment, and you identify which question goes where.
Well, and that's
And so
probably
it's very, very
focus,
clear.
7,
So, because writing
12.
an assessment.
Oh, yeah.
Conversations,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not an easy thing.
We don't.
To make it very tied back to the standard.
system.
We talked
Yeah.
about how
Oh,
those,
yeah.
the district common
So, yeah,
assessments
I've
have
got
to
her
be, have to be able to measure a skill and not necessarily.
The other thing
they do
that
it.
works
So,
well too, I think
like
about
if you're
just the
doing
RTI
to
side
kill
and
black
students
and
rating.
you're doing character
Creates a
development,
better
well,
communication
you don't necessarily, you should be able to have
And hopefully
standalone,
maybe
maybe a
have some
little
parents in that haven't normally.
snap of it, of the board, or a different board, to be able to use that to, it is like character development. So, can they use the skill in, across any piece text line? So it's just that idea that we wouldn't throw skills necessarily that within the units of the team.
They do it on
So even though
Does that make sense?
they still
But to
have
get to that, so our whole goal in a 6-week cycle, we try to shoot for 6 weeks, is we would analyze student work at least once in that 6-week cycle.
What I think
We
the
would try to
biggest
identify ways to
bigger than
intervene.
that is
with
what
So-
they brought from the high school is.
So, or at least
When you
now.
have MTSS or
Well, we have used our homeroom time. And so what we really feel homeroom curriculum is so important just because of that social emotional connection. And so
Yeah, no.
we are actually having
The
conversations
11th
right now, like
grade
how
usually
does this work?
follows
How can we
just daily.
do it just like Chuck was
Daily.
saying?
Right,
with the
yeah.
teacher.
What's best
So-
and what?
But that's 11th grade though.
No, it can be 10th grade.
But think about, yeah, but it's just like, and then is there office hours?
So those are the pieces. So hopefully, you know,
I was just.
I mean, a goal if I were to, like, essentially, would be like,
Yeah, I
take
mean,
this list or
Kent Massey,
Yeah.
all of
analyze
that.
it, or
You
collaborate
always have something
and use one of these documents to analyze.
Because I remember being surprised because
Probably
it
more
was
than
16.
Over
No.
16%.
Not too bad.
Yeah, it's
Because it's like, I think about.
Yeah, at the very end.
He doesn't care where he is anyway. And then when I don't have these, I have to come and do myself. But it's still the structure of our day.
The structure is one thing, but then the structure of
Well,
making sure there's a common thread of learning going on in there is the other challenge.
You ready to switch?
I think so.
I don't know, if he's something.
Because it's not the way I wanted
I'm just on my own.
Still one.
How's it going?
So, 10th and 11th grade, versus 11th grade, maybe
You could have
I'm not
some
doing anymore.
kids.
eight period.
Well,
So
then
that's all three skills. That's how it numbers.
Other than you can get.
Yeah, and then we have to put out which kids, because they don't have any.
And then the 11th, our 11th graders, you know, has kind of kept
They didn't get to
it
It's hard when they don't
Yeah.
want
Just a
to.
handful of years ago.
So simple.
The writing class.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be nice if we had
Advocating what might help. And so it's difficult to try to figure out a strategy.
Yeah.
And I understand that.
All right.
And we're at different points when we try to get stuff.
All right,
Figure out
friends.
something.
We're going to be teaching.
My thing was last year,
I'm just gonna put this kind of in the middle.
presentation.
Instead of writing,
We rarely pass.
very challenging.
It's not even, I mean, so you can't even say that that's
Well, I
enough.
don't think we get the
We rarely have to.
And then you can't have that up here, so.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, we're just going around, this is just to reference. Okay, so, Jack and I kind of shared this already, this is from the new teacher center. You know, it's the old coaching method of analyzing student work and going through, if you were going to take a standard or a learning target, and being able to do a quick assessment. It could be an exit, something easy and be able to identify what it is. So this is kind of the standard way of doing it. How many people have gone through a document like this, or,
Like Clinton.
yeah, and
They have a.
yeah, okay. So it really just gets to what each level of learning needs to happen and then ways to differentiate and, you know, picking a strategy. Whoops. It's empty. Picking a strategy to best fit into that group's needs students. Now, the other piece of it is that we talked about that macro approach, so looking at the big picture
Yeah.
and being able to analyze collaboratively and quickly. And I'm going to get on the computer and show you this spreadsheet. But it's the idea that we want to know by student, by standard, if we're proficient, or if you do by student, by learning target. And so you would list your standards or your learning targets, you know, what are your 8 or 10 or how many English priority standards do you have?
Struggling because it's not as much to deal
We
with.
had,
So you have 11?
no, we got it down to 5 or 6, because to do that on 11.
Yeah, so yeah, that's what I'm saying, you would have like your 6 big ones here. And then you would have, you could either list your names, or you could just leave it as teacher A, B, or C, it doesn't matter whose name it is. It's the idea that you're looking at what strategy. And it's the idea that we all know where we're gonna start, so what standards we start, that's the agreed upon, that's here. And we all know the end point, you know, what's our common assessment, we're all gonna give it the same. Now, then you have that art of teaching and the individualism of how to get there might be a little bit different. You're probably gonna use a lot of the same strategies, but you know, the feel of an individual classroom may be a little bit different. But you're gonna start at the same point, you're gonna end at the same point. And then this lets you analyze, how did each group of kids do? What strategies did you use? And you can have that conversation.
This is,
And then you can jump
true
into
little- yeah, it's
the
true
same
vignettes
piece
from
of,
true
you know, the
classroom.
new teacher center analyzing student
But
work.
as
What
it always goes with
What's the
vignettes,
common
there's no
misconceptions, or
real
what were the common
human element to
performances that you
this.
can list for each group?
You don't have
And
a feel
then
for the
what
kids.
are some strategies that you can use with each group? So you can
do
use
the
this
best
from
you
year
can
to year.
Kind of read, pick one of the
and
scenarios.
Go back and see, how did my students do on these learning targets the very first time I taught them?
Kind of more
What are
like
ways or common
English
mistakes that we did, so you can
project.
fix that or put it into your lesson plan the next time?
And-
But then, how are we going to intervene with them? So,
And so maybe
I'm going to
look
show you the doc here,
through
and it's linked in the presentation as well.
Framework of analyzing student work.
But
might
you can
divvy
easily
up
go in and you would just plug in
what specific
how many students you have, total number of students you teach, based on how your department defines proficiency right now. And it could be they had to do a video and use your rubric. So however you define proficiency, on whatever assignment you did, how many met that proficiency goal, and it gives you the number of students on that standard that were proficient. So you know by student, by standard, who was proficient. You would plug it in for each teacher, then you can see as a grade level on that priority standard, how many kids are proficient, how many are not proficient. And you would go in and list, because we're hoping, it's not going to be a large number that we're not proficient. But you would then be able to put what student was not proficient on the standard. All of a sudden, you have a list of kids for your MTSS time or your RTI enrichment time that we need to reteach or we need to intervene on in some way because they were not at that standard. So it gives that big picture district look of by student, by standard, and it's an easy way to kind of go through and analyze it. And it's also a nice piece to have for those kind of misconceptions and those interventions. Yes.
So once you do that, let's say in our RTI, and we do that in an enrichment, at that point in time, we have to go back and reassess. I mean, again, I don't know, but in English, we will come back to it eventually. I mean, we will come back to it this cyclical.
Numbers on the math.
So like if you have, a unit
What it is
thing going on
some kids
and
that
you're
have
assessing character
multiple
development,
problems,
and
some kids
in
have one
another
problem.
unit in the spring,
So
you have that standard again, is that what you're saying,
Right.
of character
I mean,
development?
or do we,
Then that would be an okay way to do it, but if you didn't have that standard.
Yeah, it doesn't
In
add up
English, it
again,
doesn't add up to.
You wouldn't want to make sure that you reassess that.
Is missing.
Right.
I just, don't- I mean, I'm all for it, but it's like, when does that occur?
Is that the
Is
one you
anybody
just
else
never
feeling
come?
that way?
When's
When
all
does
this
that
start
occur?
come
I
together?
have 8,
Don't worry about the
because in
exact
RTI,
numbers.
if I'm focusing on that one, I may have 4 standards, so then that's 4 weeks in a row that I'm gonna work on that, a different.
You guys all got
So
Target.
again,
I'm just
we're
trying to
only
figure out-
intervening on the
You've seen it
priorities.
around, I'm sure.
Right.
So there's that, if you picture the big circle of things that you're teaching in your room, which is a lot of things. And then you're drilling down to the things, you must know these
in their
things
toolbox. It's really
for me to say that you're
the
proficient
way to apply
and
it consistently.
finish at this level.
But if we have 3 standards on
I
the
don't think
research
there's any
paper,
magic
3
bullet.
different standards that we have targeted.
It's a system to
In
manage
one
it.
enrichment,
That's
you
efficient.
can only target one of those standards.
I
don't you?
suspect one of the 3 standards though would be a power standard, right?
Right, well, I'm talking about all, I'm
All
talking
3 powered standards?
possibly.
Well,
we
we've
were
got,
10
I'm
years
just
ago.
looking, we have data right now in
They're
our
all
first patient
on
narratives.
iOS.
We've got 6
Seems
standards, and we're
simpler.
ready to put in, and we've got numbers on them, but we haven't had time to even go to like the common misconceptions and intervention strategies. We've got the kids identified, and so we could.
Did you use this form? Yes.
So when do you plan to address that and reassess if
Right.
you're not gonna go back to it?
Right, and then some of them, it's like now we're assessing the research paper right now.
Hey,
so we're
everybody,
using
we got a little break.
But still, it's like RTI, when we've got a homeroom on Thursdays,
Starting at
is out of
11
time,
o'clock.
and then some of these kids, we've got a handful of kids that are missing everything. You know, and then we've got a handful of kids that, even with RTI work, I've had to put my hand in the room. He says, I refuse to revise, I refuse to.
And
And
so that's where.
So if you can have those questions, you where you are, right?
Well, it's that we all start planning. So in between your units, should you plan an extra week? So you might have to cut out a unit. But, I mean, it gets to that idea of you have to plan time